Are we live? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Wednesday, the 25th of August, 2021, and the Gremlins are right in there, or MI5 or whoever. Just as we went live, unfortunately, we lost the connection, but never mind. Welcome to the People's International Chat Show tonight. I'm Colin Macpherson from Germans for Scottish Independence. And as you can see, we have a very special guest tonight, the former First Minister of Scotland and currently the leader of the Alba Party, Mr. Alex Salmond. Hi, Alex, you're muted. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing tonight?
I was waiting for you to finish before I unmuted that. I'm totally in command of all these technical things, you know. I'm absolutely fine. I'm absolutely fine tonight. My correct title just now, incidentally, is Leader Designate of Alba.
Yes.
So I'm Leader Designate and until I get to the conference.
Well, strictly speaking, you're still leader, but you're also, for the new term, the leader designate.
Because there's no other candidates, so I should manage to win a one-horse race. So I may well become Alba leader in a 2 or 3 weeks' time.
You'll be doing better than Murdo Fraser then.
Well, Murdo Fraser always managed to lose every electoral contest he's ever fought in. So he has an enviable record. But then, of course, Murdo Fraser's always been one of my secret agents. Revealed to this august gathering, he's actually been working for me for a long time, working in the cause of Scottish independence by undermining the Conservative and Unionist Party. It's a spectacular job he's done over the years.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks very much for joining us, Alex. And I know you're a busy man. You've got another appointment later on tonight, so you won't be able to join us for the whole show. But we will put a few questions from our viewers to you as soon as possible. First of all, of course, let me welcome the rest of our panel tonight. Ladies first, Nancy McGivor in Dunfermline. Nancy, how you doing? Good to have you back.
I'm very well, Colin. Thanks for having me on.
Yep, always good to have you on. And our producer, Netherlands for Independence, Raimond Dijkstra in The Hague. How you doing, Raimond?
Doing pretty good.
That's good. Well, we're going to push on. I see a lot of you joined us in the old feed. I see quite a few of you have joined us back in the new feed. If you know folk looking for us, please tell them where to find us. I'm going to save a bit of time because Alex, as I say, will have to leave us during the show, and we don't want to waste any time. So all our regular viewers and all of you joining us for the first time, welcome. This is the Grassroots International Chat Show, Scottish independence, not just from a Scottish perspective, but also from an international perspective. And to start the ball rolling tonight, 7 years ago, we were all really excited. We were just a couple of weeks away for the referendum. Since then, not necessarily a great deal tangible has happened. So I'll bring you in, Alex. Are we maybe nevertheless closer to independence now than we were in those heady days of August and early September 2014?
Well, nothing in life or politics is inevitable, but I've always thought Scottish independence was as near inevitable as it gets. And what we were arguing about was timescale. And my reason for that is that I don't think any country has come as close to independence as we have over so long a period, and then turned back at the last minute. So I was always confident that we would get another chance, and always confident that when we get that chance, then this time Scotland will take it. Having said that, like a lot of people, I'm perplexed and bemused about the lack of progress over the last 7 years, the manifest opportunities, the leading one of which, of course, was the extraordinary decision of the UK to withdraw from the European Union against the wishes and will of the Scottish people. If you'd said to me in 2014, look, what the Westminster Parliament are going to do is withdraw from the European Union against the will of Scotland, and then elect Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, then I'd have said to you, then, well, let's get the lunch box packed for the first meeting of the independent Scottish Parliament. It would have been a done deal, a shoe-in. Now that has happened, we're out of the European Union. Boris Johnson is in as Prime Minister. And for some reason that I cannot fathom, there seems to be an unwillingness to push forward the independence cause. Now, at various times in Scottish history, and I'm a great exponent and student of Scottish history, Scotland has suffered a rush of blood to the head and snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. One thinks of the Battle of Dunbar in the Cromwellian period. We're suffering right now from a reverse rush of blood to the head. We're suffering from a failure of nerve and a failure of leadership, and the manifest opportunity and window to take Scotland to independence, which is wide open at the present moment, is not being exploited, and at some point that window of opportunity will close. And if it does close, and if we don't take it, then where you might well say in 2014 Scots had the opportunity and didn't take it, this time round they won't even get the opportunity, and that is a great tragedy. And I share the frustration of so many people that I find it inexplicable why at this momentous stage in the nation's history there should be a sudden failure of nerve, which is not allowing Scotland to be galvanised to force Westminster's hand in allowing or granting what is our inalienable right, which is the right of self-determination. A right which obviously, when not granted, should be claimed, as every other country who's gone through this process has had to do.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. Raimond, again, you've been involved for many a year. Do you think we're closer now, or are we further away?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. If we look at the percentages of where we started in 2013-14, and you look at the percentage that basically we are still at, if the campaign is started, we wouldn't have to be going as far as the SNP did in 2013-14. They started about 21%, I believe, that were for independence, and now polls say around 50, 55, something like that. So in that way, you would be closer. One thing that I look at is that we might not be closer is all the infighting that goes on. You see that with SNP and ALBA members, but also within the entire Yes movement. And in that way, you might say, oh, we might not be closer, but I really, really hope we can overcome that all and just push through. That's
of course, I mean, it will be important that when we do finally get the campaign up on the road, that folk will unite. I don't think that we have to be under any illusions there. Nancy, what's your thinking? You were a rather late convert to Yes, but now you've been very active over the last few years as well. Do you think we're on the right road?
I think we have to say, yeah. I agree with Raimond, look at the statistics and the figures. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, here, that when you started the referendum, we were at 23% or something. It was a low figure like that.
It was a wee bit more. 29% would be the sort of, when I signed the Edinburgh Agreement, we were at 29%, even in 2013. I mean, I was doing a programme today, which coincidentally had the YouGov poll was showing 27% or something support for independence, a year before the referendum. So we were starting from a long way back.
Yeah. And right, you took us right up to 45%, possibly more. We don't know how that worked out. But no, I think now, if we got a date, then yeah, I think we would breeze it this time. But we need something to focus on, and just now we're not getting anything.
I mean, of course, the Yes movement can galvanise. They showed that in the run up to 2014. And before we go on to the questions, because we've got a lot of questions to put to Alex, and Alex doesn't have a great deal of time, I'd just like to...
I'm very worried that your computer's overheating, because all I can see is smoke wafting up.
Oh, no. It's all healthy.
Good.
Just 30 years ago this week in the Baltic republics, they did a human chain between Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, and they really showed of what the people can do if they want to. And I think that has to be a call to the Yes movement. Come together, put aside any of your divisions, any of your disagreements, and let's get independence done first. I think that is important. But I'd like to come into the questions, and Nancy, you'd like to ask the first question to Alex?
Yes, please. So, Alex, two of the most contentious points used by the opposition in the media in 2014 were that we could never confidently confirm which currency an independent Scotland would use. And secondly, the question of how the border would look or how we'd be managed. So how will you reassure or explain to the doubters and the undecided these same points that were undoubted, they will undoubtedly come up again in the up and coming referendum?
Yeah, I mean, I don't share the analysis of many people that these were crucial to the campaign. I mean, if you take the second debate with Alistair Darling that I held, I mean, he got smashed on the currency, and the whole audience. I'm not just smashed by me in terms of debating, but the whole audience was laughing at him, and that overwhelmingly was, put that issue to bed. We didn't lose the referendum because we lost the currency debate. We didn't lose the currency debate, and it wasn't the thing that was motivating people in the referendum. Similarly, on borders in 2014, apart from Rory Stewart building a cairn somewhere in the north of England, nice guy incidentally, but slightly touched. I didn't really see much about borders in the campaign for the very good reason we were in the European Union, and most people accepted that the issue of borders was for the past. It was over and done with. It was gone a long time ago. Now, of course, it's a different situation. Now, things have changed. The world changes. Economics changes. In 2014, for reasons which I could go into at great length, but won't because we have questions to ask, I was keen to pursue, let's call it a continuity independence. That is to say, because we were taking people from a long way back towards independence, I wanted to keep as much of the world in the same place as it was while gaining Scotland's sovereignty. It was a kind of Michael Collins position, if you like, if you think about Ireland. The world has changed now. We're out of Europe. We can't have the continuity. I mean, part of my thinking on the currency was based on our position within the European Union. If we were part of a trading bloc, which our southern neighbour England was also in, it seemed to make comparatively little sense to have your own currency in addition to sterling, in addition to the euro within that trading bloc. Now, of course, the world has moved on. That's no longer the most important priority because we are not in the trading bloc. And therefore, the arguments for our own currency as quickly as possible are much, much greater. And the second thing that's changed in economics is we're in the world of new monetarism, as it's called. But basically, we're in the world of very low inflation. And it's quite important to be able to borrow in your own currency to finance your way through the COVID recession, through the recovery that's going to be required. And basically, a currency is really, really important in 2021. In a way, it wasn't to the same extent in 2014. And we'd be daft not to catch up with the world development. So my answer in 2021 would be different from what it was in 2014 on both these questions. On currency, I would advocate moving to a Scottish currency as quickly as feasibly possible. Yes, of course, we could still use sterling, as anyone could in the interim, because it's a tradable currency until you establish your own Scottish pound. But you should move to it as quickly as possible because you'll want to borrow in your own currency to finance the economic reconstruction that's going to be required in all countries, but particularly in Scotland. Secondly, the issue on borders is now fundamentally different and much more problematic, and it worries me greatly that the leading party of independence hasn't faced up to the issue in a rational and sensible way. I mean, we should be looking clearly at the model we want. In Alapa, we are proposing entry into the single marketplace through the EEA and the EFTA as an immediate step, but a relatively step you can take within the transition period to independence in a way that re-entry into the European Union can't. And therefore, we have to judge our position in the marketplace, if we're judging in the customs union, in a way, for example, like Norway does at the present moment, because we can see the reality of borders or lack of them between Norway and Sweden, and we've been roughly in the same position. But whatever alignment you choose, you can't dodge the issue. And the lack of preparation is extraordinary at the present moment. The fundamental lack of homework in building the economic and social case for independence for the 2020s and beyond, in a way that was done, and not everybody loved the white paper of 2014, but it was a working document. It was feasible. It could be implemented. It was a route to independence. There is no current route to independence from the leading party of independence. It just isn't. And that worries me greatly, because if we're forcing the issue, you need two things. One, you need the determination to force the issue. That's a sine qua non. And secondly, you need the programme, the platform, the signpost for independence that you're going to ask people to vote for. So, quick answer. The answer I would give to these questions is different from 2014, because the world has changed. And as a great English economist, John Maynard Keynes, once said, when the facts change, I changed my mind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. And that brings us maybe quite nicely on to the second question. The questioner wishes to remain anonymous. He's a very prominent person within the independence movement. I'll just say that much. Alex, do you believe what the SNP and Greens are saying, that there will be an independence referendum in 2022 or 2023?
No, I don't, because there's no indication whatsoever that the determination to force the issue, or an answer to the obvious questions: what can you do when Boris Johnson says no? And I find this totally inexplicable, incidentally, because I mean, I didn't have much time for David Cameron and George Osborne, but as a combination, Cameron and Osborne are fundamentally stronger, more impressive than Boris Johnson and Michael Gove. I mean, there's absolutely no comparison in terms of political calibre. And therefore, if we could face down Cameron and Osborne back in 2012 for the Edinburgh Agreement, then why can't we face down Johnson and Gove in 2021? And if they say no, say they stand on their parliamentary dignity and say you're not getting it, then you work out a programme of legal, civil, international action to force their hand. But the reason I don't believe the date of 2022 or whenever is because that will take time. It takes time. The other side don't just suddenly say, "Oh, jolly good, you've won. Cricket rules demand that we now give you your innings," or whatever. It's just in politics, doesn't work like that way. You need determination to face down your opponents. And that determination, it just isn't there. My own view is that Nicola lost her nerve back in 2017 and she hasn't got it back again. And of course, I mean, Nicola has great political skills, communication skills, in the pandemic, for example. But the skill that's most needed of a leader of the national movement is to provide the circumstances by which the country can obtain its national independence. Everything else is secondary, or should be secondary, to that objective. What we seem to be seeing now is every time something important comes up, like Europe or COVID, it's used as an excuse for postponing bringing independence to the touch. These are the things that justify the need for independence in the modern world. The European issue, obviously. The COVID issue, how are we going to engineer a fair recovery with Boris Johnson at the helm? These are arguments for immediate independence, for moving towards that decision, not arguments for postponing it. And the fact that they're used as arguments constantly for postponing it, it doesn't just give me some grief. I'm sure it gives grief to the vast majority of the independence movement.
Thank you. Raimond, do you want to come in on that quickly?
No, just move on.
Move on. Okay,
Yeah,
we do have a lot of
fine.
questions.
Yeah,
We're trying.
exactly.
That's what I'm suggesting. Move on.
We're trying. Well,
Hey, good point.
we have a lot of questions. We're going to try and take as many as we can. So I'll move quickly on to the next one, which is basically a double question. One's from Andrew McCall. Alapa should ideally be working with the SNP. Do you think that there are enough good people in the SNP at a high enough level who can push things on? And William Forbes, what do you feel Alapa can do for independence, given that there were no MSPs voted into Holyrood? Will Alapa now look to challenge the SNP in certain areas, or still remain a list party?
Well, the answer to the second question is it's really up to Alapa. You know, Alapa is now going to have its elected leadership in two weeks' time, and then it can devise its political strategy. The decision's already been made to contest the local elections next year, and that will be a really important opportunity for a new party, especially because, as you know, it's in an SDV system, which people can vote in preference. They can vote Alapa 1, SNP 2, or SNP 1, Alapa 2, whatever they want. And that, of course, gives opportunities to make a political breakthrough and get a case across. I mean, Alapa fought an election, you know, after being in existence for a few days, you know, with no logo or party description on the ballot paper, which was something of a disadvantage in my estimation. But we fought an election after a few days of existence. But in that election, we said, look, we're asking people to vote SNP in the constituency and vote Alapa on the list. Now, seldom in history do I know of a political party which has been as generous than our political party as to actually advocate its supporters go and vote for the other party in the constituency section. And what we got from the SNP, rather like the Independence for Scotland party had got before Alapa, so I don't think it's about personalities, it's much more about the cuckoo's nest or dog in a manger politics, was nothing but a barrage of insults. In the SNP, you know, when I joined it, I was always conscious that it was only one part of the national movement. It was the political instrument of the national movement, but we knew that there was a difference between the party and the movement. Because we became dominant under my leadership, and I never lost that knowledge or that thought, which was why back in 2014 I was so keen to get the grassroots eruption of Yes supporters, which almost helped carry us to victory in the summer of 2014. I think for a great number of people in the SNP, that central appreciation has been lost. The SNP don't own the national movement of Scotland. They never have. They are merely the political instrument of that national movement. And the lack of understanding of that is a severe problem for many in the SNP. What would Alapa's role be? I regard Alapa rather like I used to regard the SNP and the Labour Party. I saw the SNP as having two roles. One was a longer role, term role, to replace the Labour Party as the dominant party of Scotland. And then there was a short-term role, which was every time the SNP won a by-election, the Labour Party rediscovered the words Home Rule. And back in the 1980s and 1990s, the role of the SNP was to become so politically threatening that the Labour Party had to deliver the Scottish Parliament. Well, similarly now with Alapa, our short-term role is to become a political force, to galvanise those in the SNP who recognise that the progress to independence is far, far too slow, and we run the risk of missing the golden opportunity of a generation, but a golden opportunity, let's put it that way, which presents to us now. And secondly, over the long term, if Alapa has the ideas and the vision to compete for political role in the firmament of Scottish politics. Remember, many independence countries going to independence had more than one independence party. And many countries on the road to independence had one independence party which was replaced by another because the circumstances demand it. One thinks in Ireland of the Irish Parliamentary Party being replaced by Sinn Féin, for example, and that can happen very quickly. So I see Alapa as having a twin role. One is to provide the impetus, the grit and the oyster of the independence movement to get things moving. Because certainly the Green Party won't move the SNP to independence. If anything, they'll slow it down further. And secondly, over the longer term, is to justify through hard work and ideas and having a vision for the future, to justify a role in the firmament of Scottish politics.
I mean, I can certainly see what you're saying about the bad mouthing that was going on, because I was involved all of last year and into the early months of this year with AFI on the steering group, and again we would get exactly the same, almost as if people weren't interested. That's past. Do you have maybe 5 minutes still, Alex?
Yes,
can do you? Because I've got a couple of questions.
My answers, okay.
Right. First one, maybe just very briefly from John Mellon and from Indie Scott News. That's Pete, based in Denmark. What's the thinking about the general election 2024, or is it too early to say?
Well, too early to say. I mean, two things. I mean, my thinking politically just now is for Alapa to. Now we've got 6,000 members, we've got 14 councillors, 2 members of parliament now. We're having our first conference is to focus our attention on making a good show in the local elections to show we've got political bite. If we can do that, we can provide impetus for the re-energising the independence movement, and hopefully we'll have that impetus will help us get to the independence test before 2024. And I absolutely agree with you. And if all of the various groups in independence had a date and an aim and an objective, a referendum date or a transition to independence date, then whatever disagreements we have at the present moment would fade away, and people would put their shoulders to the wheel and collectively join and back that cause and back that effort. The frustration and the problem is, how do you get that date? And how do you get date without energising and galvanising the Scottish people? Look, there is a political army waiting to be led, but they do need to be led.
Right. I'm going to skip the panel because we're very short of time.
Go ahead.
Brian Lord Muckty Leith on Twitter mentions the various online trolling, aggressive, nasty attacks on both sides. I mean, we're seeing Alapa supporters slagging off the SNP and slagging off the Greens. We're seeing SNP supporters slagging off Alapa. Is that something that you might address at conference and maybe ask your supporters, the Alapa supporters, to take a slightly different tack? Or is it something you think the social media should regulate?
Well, I don't want to be in a situation where Alapa supporters have to be regulated by some social media. We self-regulate. And yes, I might well say something about that at conference. Listen, political debate is well justified. I mean, I was asked for comment today and I made some criticisms of the SNP Green coalition deal, as you'd expect. I mean, you see, as a thing, after a generation of representing the northeast of Scotland, I'm going to sit by and watch Patrick Harvey sign a death knell to 100,000 jobs in the North Sea. Of course I'm not. What do you think after the transport infrastructure as First Minister, which I started to build in Scotland, none of which would have been built with the Greens incidentally. I mean, if it had been the Greens, if I'd brought the Greens into government, there'd be no Forth Crossing, there'd been no Aberdeen Western Peripheral Route, there'd be none of the great infrastructure projects, because they were against all of them. Which we managed to bring forward. How do you tell people in the northeast of Scotland or in the Highlands we're not going to dual the A96 because Patrick Harvey doesn't want it? Look, the challenge, for example, of decarbonising transport is to do that, is to decarbonise transport, not to abandon transport and stop building roads. You just want to get electric vehicles running up and down the roads instead of petrol ones. It's obvious. You don't stop road building or stop transport, just as you don't stop jobs to get to zero carbon. The trick is to get to zero carbon and keep the economy going, not to do many of the things which seem to be the underprint of a... So it's perfectly legitimate to have a political debate about the route forward to for Scotland. That's fine. Some of the stuff backbiting, name calling. I've never engaged in it. I never will. I believe in vigorous political debate, but I don't believe in online name calling. And I may well say something about that, because there's some debates running in Scotland which are very hot and very, very toxic and very difficult. For example, the whole self-identification debate, transgender debate. There are ways to tackle such a debate in a way that, as First Minister, I tackled the equal marriage debate, which was running very hot back in 2012, 2013. But that isn't happening just now, and it's running as a very, very fierce debate. But the way that people conduct themselves in terms of how they pursue that debate is not perhaps as important as the principle itself, but it's almost as important. And the way you conduct yourself when you're advocating independence is absolutely critical. It doesn't mean you should bow the knee to somebody who's arguing for nonsense. On the contrary, you should vigorously debate and oppose them. But name calling, backbiting, nonsense is, leave that to the relatively small number of internet trolls who are basically speaking to themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, and if we could maybe just squeeze one final question in, Raimond, you had a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah. The past weekend, there was the anniversary of the capture and subsequently the execution of William Wallace. How do you want people to remember William Wallace? What kind of role? How do you want people to remember him?
At the 700th anniversary back in 2005 of Wallace's execution, I made a speech in a church in London near Smithsgate.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a culmination of a march that had been led by the Wallace Society and members of it. Some of them have passed since then, but we're all grateful. And the church was packed, and honestly, I think I made one of the best speeches, certainly one of the better speeches of my life, in trying to epitomise what Wallace stood for, and in particular trying to let people understand why, despite many establishment attempts over the generations to eclipse and to snub out of history the Wallace story, they never managed it. I mean, the Wallace Monument, was built by public subscription. There's a reason for that. It wasn't going to be built like many other monuments by governments. It was built by people because the folk in memory and the oral history, which was passed down from generation to generation, underscored the fact that Wallace's key attraction is he emerged not from the poverty-stricken peasantry, but he emerged out of the magic circle of the aristocracy to let Scotland find itself at a crucial stage in its history, and made the sacrifice which he did. So that was Wallace's attraction through history, and an unbending patriotism, which inspires me then. It inspired me when my granda first told me about it, way back in Linlithgow in the late 50s and early 60s. Inspired me when I made that speech in London in 2005, and still inspires me till this day.
Okay, thanks very much, Alex. I know you've got to rush off. Thank
Nothing
you so much.
As interesting as this.
No, I mean, we had plenty more questions, but thank you so much for joining us, and maybe we'll have you on the show another time in a few months.
Very pleased to do that. Maybe after the Alpha conference.
Yeah, that would be great. We'd love to have you back.
You can tell us where we went wrong in the resolutions.
Okay. Well, thanks, Alex. See you another time.
Bye, guys.
The show, everybody, is going on. Don't all have to switch off the show now. So, lots of questions, short space of time. Because of the time constraints, I didn't bring the panel in as much as I would initially have liked to. Nancy, maybe your first thoughts on that quick 30-minute Q&A with Alex Salmond.
All I've got to say is there's a lot to think about there.
Yeah.
Raimond?
Definitely. One thing I would like to say to people watching, there were people asking questions on the chat already. I'm sorry we couldn't get to that, and that's why we asked people to send in questions up front. But sorry we couldn't get to that. But we did see them. But sorry about that. But yeah, there like Nancy said, there's a lot to think about. But really the main thing is just stop the idiocy of attacking one another. We need each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, that's something I've been seeing in the comments tonight. There has been a wee bit of sniping backwards and forwards, like we've been seeing all over social media ever since Alpa turned up. We're seeing it, and it goes from both sides. And again,
Yeah.
Brian's point, I mean, folk, Alex said it himself, he might even speak about it in conference. We can agree to disagree, and there is no need to be abusive to one another, whether you're in Twitter or whether you're in real life. So, folk, again, independence. We have to keep the eyes on the prize, and we will have to work together. It's not going to happen if SNP supporters say, oh, I'm not going to go and march with that boy because he voted for Alpa, and the other boy voted for the Greens, the other boy voted for whatever. ISP, I mean, ISP are going to be standing in the council elections from what I can gather as well. As far as I can gather, AFI probably aren't, but again, that's a decision that AFI will be making over the coming weeks and months. But we do all have one common goal, and that is independence. And we will never get there if we end up fighting more with each other than against the British state. So on that basis, Raimond, what can the grassroots movement do right now where the political situation is, if you like, in limbo, to move things forward for Scottish independence, and given that we still are in the middle of a worldwide pandemic?
Well, basically, keep on doing what you're doing now. Is just keep the motion of it all. Just keep it going. I mean, basically, what I've said before about when people said, well, the S&P needs to get a what was it? Can't think of the word. A campaign going. They need to no. Technically, the Yes movement have kept it going. They just need to jump on board, and that's what basically the entire Yes movement needs to think of, is that we are so close in doing that. So the only thing that can stop us is us. So if you don't want to be in this union, then we need to stop the infighting. And that's what needs to happen.
Nancy?
One word we need, and it's unity.
Exactly.
We need to unite the country. That is a goal we should be setting ourselves. I haven't opened myself up to attack. I haven't attacked anybody. I've got good friends on both sides. I still, regardless of who they vote for, they're still good friends. I would never dream of attacking them. So I don't know where all of this anger's coming from, but we need to focus it at the right people, not at each other.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that was a good point that Alex made, that in other countries, there isn't just one pro-independence party. There are several. It's been the case throughout history. We just have to look at Catalonia right now. And again, we know Catalonia is a different situation, but there are several parties that are in favour of independence, and they managed to work together. So again, that's the political movement, and those are the elected politicians. And again, maybe just to make something quite clear for a few of the folk that were asking if this was an Alex Salmond appreciation show. No, it wasn't. We give everybody who wants to come on the show a platform to promote Scottish independence. And I think that those folk that were making those snide remarks probably weren't watching 2 weeks ago when we had Angus MacNeil, an SNP MP, on the show as well. So don't come to us with that. We are looking for unity within the movement, and we are asking you, pleading with you to stop all this bloody infighting, because it's not doing anybody any good. It's fine to be critical of other parties and other parties' positions, but we need to keep focused. We need to keep our eyes on the prize, because the British establishment is up there against us. It was very, very interesting that just the minute we were to go live tonight, the Gremlins bumped in. Now, it might have been a coincidence. It might well have been a coincidence. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But it was very, very good timing at the same time, you have to say. So if you're watching Mr. Gove, Mr. Johnson, or Dominic Raab, if the sea's still closed and you can't get out in your paddle boat, we're not going away in Scotland, not by a million years. So on that basis, I'd like to go back into the marches and rallies. Raimond, I know you have organised, was it 3 in The Hague so far, and 2 that went online because of the pandemic. Exactly. We have organised 2 in Berlin. We had to cancel the last one we had planned due to the pandemic, and waiting to see how the pandemic progresses. And of course, in Scotland, marches and rallies, we have all under one banner at Faslane this week. They've got another 2 planned in the coming weeks. We have Yes To, and we have the Scottish Independence Movement, who marched in Glasgow, was it last weekend, I think? Again, we're seeing lots of different people organising events, specifically in Scotland, because let's be perfectly clear, Nancy, what we do in Berlin and what Raimond does in The Hague is nice as a complementary thing, but it's not going to persuade any no voter in Scotland to vote yes. How important do you think it is now in Scotland for the grassroots, in as far as they feel safe and in as far as COVID restrictions allow, to actually get back out in the street again, marching for independence throughout Scotland?
I think it's really important, but I've noticed within grassroots as well that there's a division. I'm not going with all under one banner because, they're pro-Alpa. I'm not going to hope over fear because pretty much we need to put all that aside. As you say, it's about keeping our eye on the prize. It's not about political parties now. It's about us and what we, the normal people, want to do about it. We need to get out there and, stay safe at the same time. There's a rally at Parliament next Tuesday and I'll be there. So if anybody can make it to Parliament next Tuesday, 1 o'clock till 3, Parliament convenes at 2 o'clock. So we want to be there and we want to be heard when Parliament starts at 2. And then Stirling is the 11th of September. And I'll be in Stirling as well, and I'll be looking forward to seeing everybody. But let's put everything political at the moment behind us and let's move forward and get out there.
Also, I think for folk that haven't seen it, the All Under One Banner Edinburgh March has been pulled forward by a week. Nancy, do you have the date at the top of your head?
I think it's the 25th.
Yeah, I think it's the last Saturday in September rather than the first Saturday in October, because apparently something else is going on in Edinburgh that day.
Yeah.
Now, of course, Raimond, with all the COVID situation, also with the Edinburgh March being pulled forward by a week, it probably means that you'll be in a similar boat to me, that you won't be able to get over to a march in Scotland this year. Is that the case?
If there was an opportunity, or if an opportunity would present itself, I would. But if numbers remain as they are now, I'm not going to be stupid and come over just because I want to. We need to stay safe for as long as we can. And, if I need to wait a little bit longer just to be safe, then I'm going to do that.
Yeah. I mean, again, similar to you, the way the numbers are going right now in Scotland, we saw on Tuesday the First Minister giving us an update of COVID with the highest recorded figures. And I think you said, Nancy, the figures today are even higher
Yeah,
and in
over
Scotland.
5,000.
And I mean, that is just meant, I mean, I've not looked at the incidence rates across Scotland recently, but what I did notice is Dumfries and Galloway right now is pushing a 7-day incidence of 600 per 100,000 inhabitants. Now, folk, that really is mental. And even with folk being double jagged, 600 is mental. The town that I stay, we've just brought in new restrictions, no lockdown yet, but there are restrictions for folk having to be tested to go into indoor areas like in bars, restaurants, like to go and have a haircut. You either have to have a test, you have to be vaccinated, double jagged, or you have to be recovered. And that is with 60 per 100,000 inhabitants. That is nothing compared to the 600,000 that we're seeing in Dumfries and Galloway right now, and we're seeing in other areas in Scotland. Now, Dumfries and Galloway, sure, 2 motorway service stations, it's where folk pass through, but remember, the Scottish Government still advises against international travel. And as long as the Scottish Government advises against international travel, even though I don't live in Scotland, I will stick to that advice. I've not seen my parents in 2 years now, more than 2 years. But it's a pandemic.
Yeah.
And I want to keep not just my parents safe, but everybody else safe.
Definitely.
So folk in Scotland, the rallies that are coming up, Faslane, Stirling, Edinburgh, and I'm sure there are a couple of other rallies also planned by some of the other groups that are organising rallies. You know, we have Hope Over Fear in September, of course, and Freedom Square. You're just going to have to do it without me. You're going to have to.
One in Glasgow as well.
Right. Yes, too. Thank you. But listen, folk, and we're taking a post that Pete Scally made, who, again, I'm sure you all know, just, again, a few days back. When you see an independence event on social media, whether you're going or not, share it. Because we did see with the last rally, the last march in Glasgow, that quite a few folk were saying, well, they didn't even know about it. Right. They don't know about it because folk aren't sharing enough. So even if you can't go, share. And then watch it in Independence Live. Easily done. You can be there in spirit, even if you can't be there yourselves for whatever reason. We're going to come round to our closing comments. We're coming up to the 1 hour mark. Folk in the chat, thank you for all your comments tonight. Sorry we couldn't take your questions to Alex and also other comments tonight. It's been a slightly different show tonight, but again, I think it was important. We'll be back to normal next week with the usual banter and bringing on the comments. So it's very much appreciated for watching us. We will have our blether at the bar tonight as per usual. Basically what that means, if you may be watching us for the first time, Raimond will open up the Zoom call to anybody who wants to come and join us after we go off air. Maybe about 10-15 minutes after we go off air, we'll let folk in. Raimond will post the link into the comments and pin it. All are welcome. It's just literally that. A blether at the bar. Think like you've been at some kind of conference, you've been at some kind of event, and you just meet for a couple of pints together, a wee bit of blether afterwards. That's what we do almost every Wednesday. We'll be doing that again tonight, and you are all more than welcome. So on that basis, coming around to the final comments for tonight, I'll start with you, Raimond.
Well, after the clock's done. But
is that your microwave?
yeah. Well, that won't ping 10 times, but
Oh, it's a pingdemic. It's a pingdemic, Raimond. You got to isolate.
well, I'm George Square now, so no. But I just want to say, please, people, just leave the egos and at the door. Just get together. Like after independence has been achieved, after that's been achieved, then you can like and dislike whoever you want. That's your prerogative. But as soon as your dislike for a person or a party, for that matter, outweighs your thirst for independence, then there's something wrong. But please don't keep your eye on the prize. Keep the eye on the prize. That's what we always say.
Okay, thank you, Raimond. Nancy, your final comments.
Yeah, I'm going down the same route as Raimond. In the words of the song, united we stand, divided we fall. Let's put politics aside. Let's put our differences aside. Let's just march straight down that field and put the ball into the net.
Put the ball into the net.
It's time, yeah.
Yeah. And on that basis, folk, I know I've said it probably a million times, well, maybe not a million, but it feels like it. I mentioned it tonight. 30 years ago this week, in the Baltic republics of Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, folk went onto the streets and they made this massive human chain. I think it was it 150 miles longer? I don't have the exact figures in my head. But folk actually got out there, stood together as one. They didn't ask permission from Boris Yeltsin. They didn't ask permission from Mikhail Gorbachev, not Gove. They just got out there and they did it. And a couple of years previously, again, as I'm sure you've all heard me say many times before, folk in the old East Germany decided they had had enough. And they didn't sit and wait back for Erich Honecker to change his mind. They got out on the streets. They gathered. And in those days in East Germany, in Leipzig and other cities across East Germany, they actually didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know if the police were going to open fire on them. They didn't know if the army was going to be brought in on them. But they still went out there and did it. And very quickly, Erich Honecker basically had his mind changed for him. And what happened after that is history. The Berlin Wall was torn down. And the same with the Baltic republics. I was in Estonia a few years back, and they do actually have a freedom square. They have a monument to their freedom. They have a museum of occupation. Now I went in there, and a lot of history, 20th century history, which is my thing anyway. And, you know, they had the German occupation, the Russian occupation. If I went in the door, paid my how many euros it was to get in. The lady at the desk says, "Oh, and where are you from?" I says, "I'm from Scotland, still an occupied country." She says, "Aye, but you had your chance and you blew it." I says, "Aye, we need to make sure we don't do it again. We need to make sure next time we get our independence." And that is as simple as that. But it's only going to happen if the Yes movement comes together as one. And folk, why should we wait for Nicola to name a date? We can get out in the streets now. We can show our support for independence now. We can make the case, make the call to the politicians that we don't want to wait any longer. And so I would encourage you, if you feel safe to do so, join the various matches and rallies that are being held in Scotland in the coming months. As Nancy said, together we stand, divided we fall. We fell a wee bit short 7 years ago. I don't want to fall again, because that day after the referendum, I think we all know how we felt that day. We don't want to have that feeling again. So folk, stick together, get out there, get the movement together, work together, make it a mass public display that Boris can say whatever Boris wants to, but it doesn't matter, because Scotland will be independent again, whether he likes it or not.
Definitely.
So folk, thanks for joining us tonight. We'll see you back here again next Wednesday with a new panel. Next week, I think we are going to be talking about the people's, the digital covenant.
Yep.
I think we have Mark McNaughton from the digital covenant on board, who will be talking about that to us. And again, there we will be taking questions out of the normal Facebook chat. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, obviously, to Alex Salmond, who is now in his next scheduled meeting. Thanks to Nancy, and thanks to Raimond, and also Raimond, as always, our producer. Thanks for that side of things as well.
No problem.
Folk, join us at the bar. Catch us again sometime. Stay safe.